You can't have that thing, on display here." Karen shrieked, her face a furious shade of crimson that clashed spectacularly with her perfectly coiffed blonde bob. Her finger, adorned with a sparkling diamond, jabbed accusingly at our vintage camping trailer, which sat peacefully in our driveway. "This is a respectable neighborhood, not some rundown campground. The HOA rules are very clear about vehicle storage." A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered, drawn by Karen's escalating volume. My heart pounded against my ribs, a drum solo of disbelief and anger. Liam, usually the calmer one, straightened beside me, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The sun glinted off the polished chrome of the trailer, reflecting the indignant glares of some onlookers and the bewildered expressions of others. Karen's voice rose to a fever pitch, echoing off the neatly trimmed hedges and manicured lawns. "I will not have our property values diminished by your eyesore. Remove it immediately, or face the consequences." Her words hung in the air, heavy with threat, leaving everyone wondering what drastic action she might take next. It all began innocently enough, a dream we had nurtured for years. Our little family, Liam and I, along with our two wonderful kids, 8-year-old Lily and 10-year-old Sam, had always adored the outdoors. Weekends were spent hiking local trails, picnicking in state parks, and dreaming of longer adventures. We lived in a lovely suburban neighborhood, full of well-maintained homes and friendly faces, mostly. The Willow Creek Estates HOA, while sometimes a bit finicky about lawn heights and paint colors, had never truly bothered us. We followed the rules, kept our yard tidy, and generally kept to ourselves. Our lives were pretty good, filled with school plays, soccer games, and quiet evenings spent reading stories. Liam worked as a software engineer, his days filled with lines of code and problem-solving, while I taught 5th grade, spending my hours guiding young minds. Our jobs were fulfilling, but they also meant long hours and mental exhaustion. We yearned for an escape, a way to truly disconnect and reconnect as a family. That's where the idea of the camper came in. Not a modern, hulking RV, but something charming, something with character. We found it tucked away in a dusty barn, an old Shasta Airflight from the 1960s, a true diamond in the rough. It was faded and worn, but its bones were good, and it whispered tales of road trips past. We spent months restoring it, pouring our evenings and weekends into sanding, painting, and polishing. Sam learned how to use a screwdriver, meticulously tightening hinges, and Lily, with her artistic flair, helped us pick out cheerful fabric for the curtains. It wasn't just a project, it was a bonding experience. We laughed, we bickered good-naturedly, and we learned from each other. Our garage became a workshop, filled with the scent of sawdust and fresh paint. Neighbors would stop by, peering in with curiosity, offering encouraging words. Mrs. Henderson from across the street even brought us cookies, admiring our dedication. "It's going to be beautiful," she'd always say with a warm smile, "I can't wait to see it finished." The day we finally pulled it out of the garage, gleaming under the afternoon sun, was a moment of pure joy. It sat proudly in our driveway, a beacon of our shared dream. The Shasta, affectionately named The Wanderer by Lily, was painted a cheerful robin's egg blue with white trim, its windows sparkling. We planned our first trip, a simple weekend getaway to a nearby lake, just to test everything out. Sam meticulously packed his fishing gear, while Lily organized her art supplies, imagining all the landscapes she'd sketch. The excitement in our house was palpable. We knew the HOA had rules about parking RVs and trailers, but we had done our homework. The bylaws stated that recreational vehicles could be parked in driveways for loading and unloading purposes, for a period not exceeding 48 hours. Our plan was to load up on Friday evening after school and work, head out Saturday morning, and return Sunday evening, giving us until Tuesday evening to unload. We believed we were well within the spirit and letter of the law. We even double-checked the exact wording, wanting to ensure we wouldn't cause any issues. We truly wanted to be good neighbors and respectful members of the community. The first few hours the Shasta sat there were uneventful. Kids on bikes slowed down to admire it, and a few walkers waved and gave us thumbs up. We were busy inside, packing duffel bags and making sandwiches for the road. The aroma of freshly baked cookies wafted from the kitchen, as Lily insisted on making travel treats. The hum of excitement filled our home. Then, the doorbell rang. Liam answered it, expecting perhaps Mrs. Henderson with another batch of cookies, or maybe young Timmy from next door asking about our adventure. Instead, standing on our porch, with an air of absolute authority and a meticulously ironed floral blouse, was Karen, the HOA president. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes, usually scanning for rogue weeds, were fixed with an icy intensity on the wanderer. "Good afternoon, Liam," she began, her voice deceptively calm, though there was an underlying tension that was unmistakable. "I see you've acquired a new vehicle." Her gaze flickered from Liam to the trailer, then back again, lingering on the cheerful blue paint as if it were a garish mistake. "Good afternoon, Karen," Liam replied, his usual friendly demeanor unwavering. "Yes, we finally finished restoring our vintage camper. We're planning our first trip this weekend." He gestured proudly towards the wanderer, hoping she might appreciate the effort we had poured into it. A small, almost imperceptible muscle twitched in Karen's jaw. "A camper, you say?" Her tone was flat, devoid of any genuine interest or warmth. "And where exactly do you intend to store this camper, when you are not on these trips?" Liam explained our understanding of the HOA bylaws, detailing the 48-hour rule for loading and unloading. He even offered to show her the section in the rulebook, hoping to preempt any misunderstanding. He emphasized that we were only parking it temporarily, just for the weekend, and that it would be moved to an off-site storage facility we had already secured once our trip was over. We had meticulously planned every detail, ensuring compliance with every regulation. We didn't want any trouble, just a chance to enjoy our new family tradition. Karen listened, her expression unreadable, her gaze fixed just beyond Liam's shoulder, as if she were inspecting an invisible flaw in our siding. When he finished, a slow, deliberate smile spread across her face, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate your diligence, Liam," she said, her voice now a little sharper. "However, I believe you are misinterpreting the spirit of the rule. This is not merely loading and unloading. This is clearly an unapproved recreational vehicle, permanently parked on your property, a blatant violation of our community standards." Liam's brows furrowed. "But Karen, it's not permanent. We just finished it, and we're leaving tomorrow morning. It will be gone by Sunday evening, well within the 48-hour window." Karen's smile vanished, replaced by a stern, unyielding expression. "The board has received several complaints," she stated, though we hadn't seen anyone else even glance at the trailer with anything but admiration. "And frankly, regardless of your interpretations, such a structure simply does not belong in Willow Creek Estates. It detracts from the aesthetic, and it sets a dangerous precedent." Her voice began to rise, betraying the calm facade she had initially presented. "I am issuing you a formal notice of violation. You have 24 hours to remove it, or face fines, escalating daily, until it is gone. Do I make myself clear?" The sudden shift in her demeanor, the thinly veiled threat, caught us completely off guard. We had expected perhaps a discussion, a friendly reminder, but not an immediate, aggressive ultimatum. The joy we had felt just moments before began to curdle into a knot of frustration and dismay. Lily and Sam, who had been quietly playing a board game in the living room, peeked around the corner, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Their bright eyes, so full of excitement for the upcoming trip, clouded with confusion. "Karen, that's completely unreasonable," I interjected, stepping forward. "We've put so much work into this, and we've followed the rules as they're written. The rules are subject to interpretation by the HOA board, Mrs. Davies," Karen snapped, turning her sharp gaze to me. And the board has interpreted this as a clear violation. You are diminishing our collective property values, and I, as president, will not stand for it. Her voice was now louder, carrying across our manicured lawn. Consider this your final warning. With that, she turned on her heel and marched off, her back ramrod straight, leaving us standing on our porch, stunned and bewildered. The sun still shone, but a dark cloud seemed to have settled over our little piece of paradise. The joy of our new camper, of our impending adventure, had been thoroughly overshadowed by the looming threat of fines and confrontation. We looked at each other, then at the wanderer, which now seemed to sit under a heavy cloud of disapproval. The dream of our first family camping trip suddenly felt very fragile. Little did we know, this was just the beginning of a far more intense battle for our peace, and a test of our resilience. This wasn't just about a camper. It was about our sense of belonging and the spirit of community itself. Karen's pronouncement left us reeling. We stood on our porch, the vibrant blue of the wanderer suddenly seeming to mock us, a bright target for her disapproval. Lily and Sam, sensing the sudden tension, had crept closer, their small hands clutching our shirts. Their wide, innocent eyes searched our faces for an explanation. How do you explain an adult acting so? Well, so mean, to children who are just excited about a camping trip? What's wrong, Dad? Sam asked, his voice a quiet murmur. Is Mrs. Peterson mad about our camper? It's Mrs. Karen, honey, I corrected gently, a weary sigh escaping my lips. And yes, she's not very happy about it. I knelt down, trying to meet their gaze, trying to find the right words to soften the blow without sugarcoating the unfairness of it all. She thinks it breaks a rule, even though we're pretty sure it doesn't. Liam, ever the pragmatist, was already pulling out his phone. I'm going to call Mr. Henderson, he said, referring to the vice president of the HOA board, a kind, soft-spoken man who lived directly across the street. He's always been reasonable. Maybe he can help us understand this better, or at least mediate with Karen. Calling Mr. Henderson was our first step in what would become a whirlwind of frustrating phone calls and confusing emails. Mr. Henderson, true to his nature, was apologetic and sympathetic. He confirmed that the rule about temporary vehicle parking was indeed for 48 hours, and he acknowledged our diligence in securing off-site storage. However, he also admitted that Karen had a very strong personality, and once she set her mind on something, it was incredibly difficult to sway her. He promised to look into the complaints she mentioned, though he sounded skeptical that any had actually been filed. He advised us to send a formal email to the HOA board, outlining our adherence to the rules and requesting clarification on Karen's interpretation. So, that evening, instead of packing last-minute items for our trip, we sat at the kitchen table, poring over the HOA bylaws, crafting a carefully worded email. We attached screenshots of the relevant sections, highlighted our compliance, and politely but firmly requested that the violation notice be rescinded. We explained our family's excitement for the trip, hoping a touch of human connection might soften the bureaucratic edges. It felt like we were preparing a legal brief instead of planning a family vacation. The next morning, a response landed in our inbox, not from the board as a whole, but directly from Karen. It was a curt, single-paragraph reply, reiterating her stance and stating that the board fully supported her interpretation. There was no explanation, no offer of discussion, just a firm declaration that the violation stood. The email also noted that if the camper was not removed by the end of the day, a fine of $100 would be issued, with an additional $50 for each day it remained. Our hearts sank. The reality of the situation hit hard. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a power play. Karen was determined, and she was wielding her authority with a heavy hand. Sam and Lily, sensing our distress, became unusually quiet. Their excited chatter about fishing and campfires had been replaced by worried glances at the trailer and hushed whispers between themselves. It broke our hearts to see their anticipation dimming. "This is ridiculous," I said, slamming my hands softly on the table. "We can't let her bully us out of our trip, out of our dream." Liam nodded, his jaw tight. "No, we can't. But we also can't afford daily fines. That's her leverage." He paused, then looked at me, a glimmer of defiance in his eyes. "We still have until Tuesday evening to unload, right? What if we just go? We stick to our plan, and if she finds us, we fight it afterwards. We have the rulebook on our side." It was a risky move, a direct challenge to Karen's authority, but the thought of letting her win, of crushing our kids' excitement, felt far worse. We decided to proceed with our trip, documenting everything. We took photos of the trailer in our driveway, time-stamped them, and noted the exact time we departed. We would prove we were adhering to the 48-hour rule for temporary parking. This was a battle for principle, not just a camper. That afternoon, as we loaded the last of our bags into the Wanderer, Karen emerged from her house. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching our every move like a hawk. Her glare was intense enough to melt steel. We pretended not to notice, focusing on our tasks, helping the kids climb in, their faces brightening slightly despite the tension. As Liam backed the trailer slowly down the driveway, I saw Karen pull out her phone, seemingly taking pictures. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This was going to be a long fight. Our trip to Lake Serenity, despite the shadow of Karen's threats, turned out to be a much-needed reprieve. The kids loved exploring the woods, skipping stones on the lake, and roasting marshmallows over a crackling campfire. The vintage Shasta, the Wanderer, proved to be a cozy haven, filled with laughter and card games. We made memories, pushing the anxieties of the HOA battle to the back of our minds. For those few days, we were just a family, enjoying the simple joys of nature. When we returned Sunday evening, the first thing we saw was a neatly folded notice tucked under our doormat. It was another violation notice, identical to the first, but this one included a fine of $100. It claimed we had violated the permanent parking clause, completely ignoring the temporary nature of our stay. The sight of it felt like a punch to the gut, a stark reminder that Karen's vendetta was far from over. The next morning, another fine arrived. And another the day after that. Karen was relentlessly piling on the penalties, ignoring our appeals and the clear language of the bylaws. We responded to each fine with a polite but firm email, reiterating our adherence to the rules and stating our intention to dispute every single charge. We kept meticulous records, every email, every notice, every photo. The stack of paperwork on our kitchen counter grew taller with each passing day. Then came the formal letter from the HOA's legal counsel. It was far more intimidating than Karen's informal notices. The letter stated that due to our repeated and willful violations, and our failure to comply with multiple directives, the HOA was considering further action, including placing a lien on our property if the fines remained unpaid. It also mentioned the possibility of restricting our access to community amenities, like the pool and the clubhouse. This was a significant escalation, a tactic designed to intimidate us into submission. It was a low blow, designed to make us feel like outcasts in our own neighborhood. The sheer audacity of it, threatening our home over a camper, sent a shiver down my spine. We knew we had to find a way to fight back, a way to make Karen see reason, or at least make the rest of the board see it. The peaceful life we had built was suddenly overshadowed by a relentless, unnecessary conflict. The lawyer's letter, formal and chilling, felt like a direct assault on our peace of mind. A lien on our property? Restricting access to the community pool, where Lily had just learned to float and Sam perfected his cannonball? It was an absurd escalation, a blatant overreach designed to instill fear. Liam and I sat at the kitchen table, the legal document spread between us, its harsh language a stark contrast to the lively drawings and school notices tacked to the refrigerator. "This is just aggressive," I murmured, tracing a finger over the bolded paragraph about further action. She's trying to scare us, Liam. She's succeeding, a little, he admitted, his voice tight. But we can't let her. If we back down now, she wins completely. This isn't just about the camper anymore, it's about standing up for what's right. His gaze met mine, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. We need to go to the source, to the HOA board meeting. We need to make our case directly, face to face with all of them, not just Karen. The thought of confronting Karen in a public forum sent a shiver down my spine, but Liam was right. Our carefully worded emails and phone calls had been systematically ignored. We needed to bring our fight into the open. We looked up the next scheduled HOA board meeting, which was set for the following week. It gave us a few days to prepare, to gather all our evidence. We spent the next few evenings like legal scholars, poring over the HOA bylaws, cross-referencing definitions, and highlighting every clause that supported our position. We compiled a binder of evidence, photos of the wanderer in our driveway with time-stamped proof of its temporary presence, copies of the original violation notices and our detailed rebuttals, and printouts of the specific sections of the bylaws that clearly stated the 48-hour rule for temporary parking. We even found a small clause that mentioned reasonable use of driveways for recreational vehicle maintenance or preparation for trips. We felt well prepared, armed with facts and a clear conscience. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, feeling like a court date. We dressed carefully, aiming for respectful but firm. Sam and Lily were staying with my sister, blissfully unaware of the looming confrontation. As we walked into the community clubhouse, the usual buzzing energy of a neighborhood gathering was replaced by a quiet, almost solemn atmosphere. About 20 other homeowners were present, some with curious expressions, others with guarded looks. The long table at the front was occupied by the 5 HOA board members, with Karen presiding at the center, radiating an aura of unwavering authority. Mr. Henderson, the vice president, offered us a small, sympathetic nod. When it was our turn to speak during the homeowner comment period, Liam stepped forward, holding our meticulously prepared binder. His voice, usually so calm, had a slight tremor, but he spoke clearly and articulately. He explained our love for the outdoors, the family project of restoring the wanderer, and our excitement for future adventures. He then meticulously laid out our case, referencing specific bylaws and presenting our evidence of adherence to the 48-hour rule. He emphasized our efforts to be good neighbors and our surprise and dismay at the escalating fines and legal threats. I followed, adding a personal touch. I spoke about the joy the camper brought to our children, the simple dream of family road trips, and how disheartened we were to feel targeted in our own community. I emphasized that we were not trying to flaunt rules or cause trouble, only seeking to understand why a temporary, legal action was being met with such hostility. We appealed to their sense of fairness, of community spirit. As we spoke, Karen sat with a stoic expression, her gaze unwavering, betraying no emotion. The other board members listened, some nodding occasionally, others taking notes. When we finished, there was a hushed silence in the room. Then, Karen spoke. "Thank you for your presentation, Mr. and Mrs. Davies," she said, her voice clipped and formal. "However, the board has thoroughly reviewed this matter. While you may interpret the bylaws as you have stated, the board's interpretation is that any recreational vehicle parked on a residential driveway for any length of time, even for loading, must be pre-approved by the board. Furthermore, the sheer size and conspicuous nature of your trailer is an aesthetic violation that detracts from the uniform appearance of our community. We have received multiple complaints, as I've mentioned, and it is the board's duty to uphold property values and maintain community standards. But there's nothing in the bylaws about pre-approval for temporary loading," Liam countered, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "And you still haven't provided any evidence of these multiple complaints, Karen." Karen's eyes narrowed. "The board is not obligated to reveal the identities of complainants, Mr. Davies. And our interpretation of loading and unloading does not extend to what appears to be a permanent fixture. The board's decision is final. The fines stand, and if they are not paid, we will proceed with the lien process as outlined by our legal counsel. The air crackled with tension. Other homeowners began to murmur, some looking sympathetic, others avoiding eye contact. A few even shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One neighbor, Mr. Harrison, a gruff but generally fair man who lived a few doors down, finally spoke up. "Karen, with all due respect, I walk by their house every day. That camper was only there for a couple of days. They just took it out for a trip. It's not hurting anything. And I haven't heard a single complaint." Karen turned her formidable gaze on Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, your personal observations do not supersede the board's official ruling. Furthermore, I find your questioning of the board's decision to be inappropriate at this juncture." The atmosphere grew heavy with Karen's unwavering stance. It was clear she was not going to budge. The other board members, perhaps intimidated by her dominance, remained largely silent, though Mr. Henderson looked increasingly uncomfortable. Our hope for a reasonable discussion dwindled with each passing moment. The meeting concluded shortly after, with Karen issuing a final, stern warning about unpaid dues. We left the clubhouse feeling utterly defeated, the weight of the fines and the threat of a lien pressing down on us. The community we once felt so much a part of suddenly felt hostile, thanks to one person's stubbornness. As we walked home, the vibrant green of the manicured lawns and the meticulously pruned rose bushes seemed to mock us. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the echoes of Karen's unyielding voice. We had done everything right, followed all the procedures, presented a solid case, and still, we were being punished. It felt deeply unfair. We knew we couldn't just give up, but what more could we do? We had hit a brick wall. This was beyond frustrating, it felt like a personal vendetta. We needed to find another angle, something outside the HOA's typical rules, to make Karen see the light. But what? The thought of our beautiful home, our sanctuary, being threatened by a lien over a camping trailer was almost unbearable. The walk home from the HOA meeting felt endless, each step heavier than the last. The spring air, usually so refreshing, now seemed to press down on us, thick with the weight of defeat. We had poured our hearts out, presented undeniable facts, and still, Karen remained unyielding, a concrete wall we couldn't breach. The silence between Liam and me was profound, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves. "What do we do now?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper as we reached our driveway, the wanderer still sitting there, a silent testament to our defiance and her stubbornness. It looked less like a symbol of adventure and more like a giant, cheerful blue target. Liam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of deep frustration. "I honestly don't know, Sarah. We played by their rules, and it got us nowhere. She's got the board wrapped around her finger, or at least they're too afraid to cross her." He kicked a small pebble, sending it skittering across the pavement. "A lien, Sarah. That's serious. We can't let it get to that." The threat of a lien hung over us like a storm cloud, dark and foreboding. It wasn't just about the fines anymore, it was about our home, our financial security. We had worked too hard, saved too long, to let some petty HOA squabble jeopardize everything. We went inside, the familiar comfort of our home offering little solace against the mounting pressure. That night, sleep was elusive. My mind raced, replaying every moment of the meeting, every one of Karen's cutting remarks. Liam was equally restless. We talked late into the night, exploring every possible avenue. Should we just give in, sell the wanderer, and hope the fines would magically disappear? The thought left a bitter taste. It felt like admitting defeat, like letting a bully win. And it would mean crushing Lily and Sam's spirits, taking away the dream we had built together. We couldn't do that to them, or to ourselves. The next morning, a new, more menacing notice arrived. It was from a collection agency, stating that due to our delinquent HOA dues, our account had been sent for collections, and interest would now be accruing daily on the growing sum of fines. This was an even more aggressive move, designed to exert maximum pressure. It felt like Karen was tightening a noose, suffocating us slowly. "This is harassment," I declared, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and growing anger. "She's not just fining us, she's actively trying to damage our credit and our standing in the community." Liam's eyes were grim. "We need professional help. We need to talk to a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes. Someone who knows how to fight these things." It was a costly step, but we felt we had no other choice. We couldn't fight a legal threat with just our good intentions and a copy of the bylaws. We needed someone with actual legal expertise, someone who understood the intricate dance of HOA regulations and property law. We spent the better part of the day researching, calling around, explaining our bizarre situation to various law offices. Most sounded sympathetic but non-committal. Finally, we found Ms. Eleanor Vance, an attorney whose online profile highlighted her extensive experience with HOA cases and a reputation for being fiercely protective of homeowner rights. Her office was in a slightly older part of town, filled with stacks of legal books and a no-nonsense atmosphere. Ms. Vance was a sharp woman in her late 50s, with keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing and a dry wit that immediately put us at ease. We laid out our entire story, from the restoration of the Wanderer to Karen's relentless fines and the lawyer's threats. We showed her our binder of evidence, the photos, the bylaws, the increasingly aggressive notices. She listened patiently, occasionally nodding or making a note. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Well," she began, a faint smile playing on her lips, "it sounds like Ms. Karen is quite the character. And quite the overzealous president." A wave of relief washed over us. Finally, someone understood, someone saw the absurdity of it all. "Your case, on the surface, seems fairly straightforward," Ms. Vance continued. "The bylaws clearly state the 48-hour rule for temporary parking. Her interpretation of a permanent fixture, when you are demonstrably using it temporarily and have secured off-site storage, is tenuous at best. The multiple complaints likely exist only in her imagination, or perhaps one or two of her closest allies. And the escalation to a collection agency without due process for dispute resolution is highly questionable." But then, she paused, her expression becoming more serious. "However, HOAs, particularly those with powerful presidents, can be like small, self-contained governments. They can be incredibly difficult to fight, even when you're in the right. They rely on homeowners giving up, on the financial burden of legal fees, and on the general desire to avoid conflict. Your goal isn't just to win, it's to make her stop." She explained the legal avenues available, demanding formal mediation, filing a countersuit for harassment, or even seeking a temporary restraining order against the HOA's actions. Each option had its own risks and costs. We discussed our budget, our willingness to fight, and our ultimate goal: to be left in peace to enjoy our home and our camper. "There's one other thing," Ms. Vance said, her eyes twinkling. "Before we go down the full legal path, let's explore every single piece of your property's documentation. Sometimes, in older deeds, there are specific clauses or easements that predate HOA formation or clarify certain property rights that the HOA cannot override. It's a long shot, but it's worth investigating every detail." It was a glimmer of hope, a novel idea we hadn't considered. We left her office feeling a renewed sense of purpose, a small spark of optimism in the face of the mounting pressure. Ms. Vance's confidence, her calm assessment of the situation, had a strangely calming effect. We were no longer alone in this fight. Over the next few days, while Ms. Vance began drafting formal letters to the HOA and the collection agency, we embarked on a new kind of treasure hunt. We pulled out every single document related to our home, the original deed, old surveys, property tax records, anything that mentioned the specifics of our lot. We spread them out on the dining room table, a mountain of yellowed paper and faded blueprints. Sam and Lily, intrigued by our new project, even helped us, feeling like little detectives searching for clues. Hours turned into days. We scanned every line, every footnote, every almost illegible notation. Most of it was standard legal jargon, dense and unhelpful. We started to lose hope, the stack of papers dwindling, our eyes blurring from the fine print. We were almost ready to give up when Liam let out a sudden gasp. "Sarah! Look at this," he exclaimed, pointing a trembling finger at a section of our original property deed, buried deep within a stack of old mortgage documents. It was a faded, almost overlooked clause, dating back to the very first subdivision of the land, long before Willow Creek Estates even existed. It was a single sentence, tucked away discreetly, yet its implications were enormous. The words jumped out at us, clear as day, shattering the oppressive silence of our home with their profound potential. This one tiny, overlooked detail had the power to change everything. "Sarah! Look at this!" Liam's voice, usually so steady, cracked with excitement, his finger trembling as it pointed to a faded line on the old property deed. My eyes darted to where he indicated, and a gasp escaped my lips. There it was, tucked away in the dense legal prose, a sentence that felt like a secret whispered across decades. It wasn't buried in a long paragraph, but rather stood out, a short, undeniable declaration. Said Parcel B, comprising Lot 14, Block 3, Willow Creek Subdivision, shall retain an easement for the temporary parking of one recreational vehicle for a period not exceeding 72 hours, 4 times annually, for purposes of loading, unloading, and minor maintenance, notwithstanding any future restrictive covenants placed upon the subdivision. 72 hours. Not 48. And 4 times a year. Not just an implied, reasonable use, but a specific, legally binding easement that predated the HOA and explicitly superseded any future rules. My heart leaped. It was like finding a hidden treasure map, leading directly to victory. "Liam," I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper, "this changes everything. This is it. This is our answer." A slow, triumphant grin spread across Liam's face, chasing away the worry lines that had etched themselves there for weeks. "This means Karen can't do a thing. Our deed protects us. It's older than the HOA, and it says right here that this easement stands, no matter what rules they try to make." We immediately called Ms. Vance, practically bubbling with excitement. We read the clause to her, slowly, carefully, making sure we didn't miss a single word. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then we heard a sharp intake of breath. Well, MS. Vance's voice crackled with renewed energy, a hint of genuine delight in her tone. "That, Mr. and Mrs. Davies, is what we call a pre-existing non-conforming right. It means that specific right, granted in your original deed, existed before the HOA was even formed. The HOA's power comes from agreements made after that deed was issued, and typically, they cannot override rights explicitly granted by an earlier, foundational document like a deed. This is a game changer." She explained that this easement wasn't just a loophole, it was a legally unassailable right tied directly to our property. The HOA could make 1,000 rules, but they couldn't undo what was written into the very fabric of our land ownership. It was incredibly rare for such a specific clause to exist, but here it was, a testament to whoever had originally subdivided the land, perhaps anticipating future restrictions or simply ensuring the flexibility for future homeowners. MS. Vance instructed us to hold on to that deed with our lives. She immediately drafted a new, much more assertive letter to the HOA board and their legal counsel. This letter wouldn't just dispute the fines, it would declare them null and void, citing the specific easement clause from our deed. It would demand the immediate cessation of all collection activities and the removal of any negative marks on our credit, with a clear threat of a countersuit for harassment and damages if they refused. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The next few days felt like a lifetime as we waited for a response. The fines continued to pile up in our mailbox, cold and official, but they no longer held the same terror. We knew we had a shield now, a powerful legal defense. Lily and Sam, oblivious to the legal intricacies, just noticed the renewed lightness in our steps, the smiles returning to our faces. We started planning our next camping trip, the fear replaced by a quiet sense of triumph. Finally, the day of the next HOA board meeting arrived. This time, we didn't wait for the homeowner comment period. Ms. Vance insisted on accompanying us, arriving with an air of quiet authority and a briefcase that looked deceptively small but probably contained enough legal firepower to level a small building. The atmosphere in the clubhouse was different from the last meeting. There was a hushed anticipation. Word had clearly gotten around about our lawyer's stern letter. Karen, sitting at the head of the table, looked noticeably less self-assured, her usual confident posture slightly slumped. The other board members avoided eye contact, shuffling papers nervously. When Ms. Vance stood up, a collective hush fell over the room. Her voice, calm and clear, cut through the tension. "Good evening, members of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association Board. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I represent Mr. and Mrs. Davies, residents of Lot 14, Block 3. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She immediately launched into a concise, powerful explanation of the easement found in our original deed. She quoted the exact language, emphasized its pre-existing and superseding nature, and explained in no uncertain terms that the HOA had no legal right to restrict our use of the property as outlined in that deed. Therefore, Ms. Vance concluded, her voice unwavering, all fines levied against Mr. and Mrs. Davies regarding the temporary parking of their recreational vehicle are hereby deemed invalid. We demand their immediate and complete removal, along with all associated collection actions and any negative reporting to credit agencies. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action for harassment, damages, and the recovery of all legal fees incurred by my clients." The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. The room was utterly silent. Karen's face, which had slowly been draining of color as Ms. Vance spoke, was now a ghostly white. Her eyes darted around the room, desperately seeking support from the other board members, but they looked away, suddenly fascinated by their notepads or the ceiling tiles. Mr. Henderson offered us a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of approval. This is preposterous." Karen finally sputtered, her voice high-pitched and strained, completely lacking its usual authority. "The HOA has the right to regulate. This is a planned community. This can't be real." She pointed a shaking finger at us, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. She looked genuinely shocked, as if someone had just pulled the rug out from under her perfectly manicured feet. "It is very real, Ms. Peterson," Ms. Vance stated, her voice calm but firm. "And it is legally binding. Your authority, while important, does not supersede a pre-existing property right. It would be wise for the board to review your legal counsel's opinion on this matter. I assure you, they will concur." The air was thick with the stunned silence of the room. Karen, for the first time, looked truly defeated. She looked at us, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury, as if she couldn't comprehend how her power had just evaporated. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her reaction, waiting for the final shoe to drop. This was the moment, the peak of the battle, where Karen's reign of terror was about to come crashing down. This is preposterous." Karen's voice, usually so commanding, cracked, her face a ghastly shade of white. She pointed a trembling finger at us, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury, as if she couldn't comprehend how her power had just evaporated. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her reaction. This was the moment, the peak of the battle, where Karen's reign of terror was about to come crashing down. Ms. Vance, however, remained completely unfazed. She simply raised an eyebrow, a picture of calm confidence. "It is not preposterous, Ms. Peterson. It is a legal fact. Your choices are clear: either the HOA immediately rescinds all fines and actions against the Davies family, or we proceed to court. And I assure you, a judge will not be as patient as I am." The silence in the room was deafening. Karen's eyes darted frantically between Ms. Vance, us, and the other board members. The weight of her past actions, the baseless fines, the harassment, now seemed to press down on her. The other board members, seeing the undeniable evidence and Ms. Vance's resolute stance, began to visibly distance themselves from Karen. Mr. Henderson finally spoke up, his voice steady. "Karen," he said, looking directly at her, "I think we need to take a 5-minute recess to discuss this with the HOA's legal counsel immediately." Karen glared at him, but her usual fire was gone. She merely nodded curtly, and the board members quickly shuffled out of the room, leaving us and Ms. Vance alone with the other homeowners, who were now buzzing with quiet conversations and stunned whispers. Mrs. Henderson gave us a small, encouraging smile. The 5 minutes stretched into 15, then 20. We could hear muffled, agitated voices from the room where the board had retreated. Finally, they re-entered. Karen's shoulders were slumped, and her face was still pale, but now there was a flicker of something new in her eyes, cold, hard resentment, mixed with utter defeat. Mr. Henderson, rather than Karen, was the one who addressed the room. "The board, after consultation with our legal counsel, confirms the validity of the pre-existing easement presented by Mr. and Mrs. Davies. All fines levied against them related to the temporary parking of their recreational vehicle are hereby nullified. All collection actions will cease immediately, and any negative reports to credit agencies will be promptly removed. We sincerely apologize for any distress this misunderstanding has caused the Davies family." A wave of relief washed over me so powerful it almost brought tears to my eyes. Liam squeezed my hand, a silent cheer passing between us. The other homeowners murmured in agreement, some even nodding in our direction. It was over. We had won. But Karen wasn't done. As Mr. Henderson concluded, she suddenly pushed back from the table, scraping her chair loudly against the floor. Her eyes, fixed on us, burned with a furious, unbridled rage. "This is a travesty!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the clubhouse. "You have undermined the very foundation of this community. You think you've won, but you haven't. This neighborhood will never be the same, thanks to your camper." She stormed past us, bumping my shoulder deliberately as she went, her face contorted into a mask of pure venom. She flung open the clubhouse door and vanished into the night, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. It was a spectacular exit, utterly befitting her character. Over the next few weeks, true to their word, all the fines disappeared from our account, and we received official letters confirming the removal of any negative credit remarks. The collection agency contacted us to apologize, stating they had been given incorrect information. The board also sent a formal written apology, signed by all members except Karen, though her name was conspicuously absent from the signatory line. Life in Willow Creek Estates slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of it. The Wanderer sat proudly in our driveway for our allotted 72 hours before each of our family trips, no longer attracting angry glares, but rather curious, sometimes admiring, glances. We took it out for weekend getaways, creating countless cherished memories with Lily and Sam, exploring state parks and national forests, exactly as we had dreamed. Karen, however, became a ghost in the neighborhood. She no longer attended HOA meetings, and her once daily walks around the block ceased. We heard through the grapevine that the other board members had effectively sidelined her, and whispers spread that she had been encouraged to step down from her presidency. Eventually, a few months later, A for sale sign mysteriously appeared in her meticulously manicured front yard. One day, a moving truck pulled up, and Karen, looking smaller and less formidable than ever, was seen directing movers, her blonde bob still perfectly coiffed, but her shoulders noticeably stooped. She never once looked in our direction. Her house sold quickly, and a lovely young couple with 2 small children moved in. They waved to us on their first day, and we waved back, feeling a profound sense of peace. The entire ordeal had been a whirlwind of stress and frustration, but it had also taught us an invaluable lesson about kindness, empathy, and standing up for what's right, even when faced with overwhelming opposition. It taught us that sometimes, the biggest battles are fought not with anger, but with facts, persistence, and a little help from a good lawyer. And so, our adventures continued, not just on the open road with the wanderer, but right there in our own home, in our own neighborhood, where we finally felt truly at peace. The spirit of Willow Creek Estates, once clouded by one person's rigid interpretation of rules, had brightened, allowing a little more room for understanding, and a lot more room for joy.